Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I'm going to be showing you guys what is currently my favorite build in all of Wonderlands. As you saw in the gameplay, this thing is crazy. This is pretty much what happens when you have a near perfect build in this game, at least when using Spellshot+Stabbo, which for this video I'm going to be calling FL4k 2.0, just to get people riled up, but also using From the Shadows kind of reminds me of Fade Away, and using the liquid cooling kind of reminds me of Vladoff AR, always landing crits, never having to reload, that sort of thing. As you saw in the gameplay, this build is insane, but it does have nearly perfect gear. There is going to be a save file for this in my Discord if you're interested, but the build took a really long time to get all of the gear for this. Big thanks to McNuggets for helping me out with that, and other people in the Discord as well. Build wouldn't be possible without them. But yeah, this build took an insanely long time to set up, test, etc. So if you guys like it, please drop a like, helps me out a ton. Also, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. There's like, I think it's like 80% of you guys aren't subscribed or something. I'm trying to get 150k at some point, so feel free to subscribe if you like the content. But anyways, let's just get into it. There'll also be some extra gameplay of a Chaos 20 done pretty quickly at the end of the video, so feel free to stick around for that if you are interested. Watching the video longer helps me out too, so want to extra support me, you can watch all day. All right, we're done selling out. So let's talk about the hero points, and then we'll get into the skill tree. Hero points, you always want to go full crit damage. We don't actually need any crit chance because we're using From the Shadows. And then I went spell cooldown just to reduce the cooldown of my Buffmeister. You could go skill cooldown if you want your From the Shadows active more often, but it's not entirely necessary. That's kind of up to preference. I myself have swapped between these two. Not a big deal. Status damage would, I guess, increase your damage against bosses, but it's a little insignificant, so not too much to worry about there. I did try out going max HP/ward, but it was annoying with my Cursed Wit. I manually break my Cursed Wit a lot, so going for extra of this was a little bit frustrating because I needed to throw down more things to be able to break my shield. But if you want more survivability, literally just take it out of spell cooldown, put it all into max HP/ward. In terms of the skill tree here, I'm not going to go over absolutely everything. I have a class item on right now that is going to give me +3 magic bullets and plus tuned arsenal, which I'll talk about later. But the main gist of this class tree is that we're taking advantage of spell shot to give us a whole bunch of extra spell damage, which we're then converting all into gun damage. And then with Stab Advancer, we're just getting a lot of extra damage from moving quickly and just flat extra damage. The main takeaways here are the additional fire rate whenever we have spell weaving stacks. Magic bullets is going to give us 90% spell damage because of our class item here. And then high thread count to get more spell weaving stacks, which then gives us more spell damage. And then more spell weaving stacks, we have 1 slot 1 kill to give us extra gun damage for that. Some extra damage via imbued weapon, and then we have some reload speed. In terms of what you may want to swap out here, you could swap out the reload speed for Font of Mana to get additional spell cooldown rate and action skill cooldown rate if you feel like it. Or alternatively, if you're using a weapon where you have to reload a lot, like not the liquid cooling, but like maybe Queen's Cry, and reloading is really annoying, you could take out an imbued weapon and put it into Warcaster. For the Stabbo tree, we're just getting the extra gun damage and spell damage, the extra damage while moving fast, the extra damage against enemies that have a status effect on them, some crit damage, be able to shoot while sprinting, and then a few points into 1,000 cuts. The reason that we don't capstone Sever the Thread is we literally do not need our spell cooldown to be any lower, and also we're just trying to get as much damage as humanly possible. If you don't really care about killing raid bosses as fast as I do, you could very easily take the points out of 1,000 cuts and put it into Sever the Thread, and then you could use a spell that isn't Buffmeister if you feel like using your spells more often. That's pretty much it for the skill tree. The reason that this build is able to do so well is you're just converting so much of your spell damage into gun damage, and you're just getting a flat, insane amount of gun damage, and then you have a lot of extra crit built in, so getting all that crit and then guaranteed critting with From the Shadows, paired with pretty much any weapon you want, while moving really quickly, your damage just scales out of control to where you can use literally any weapon that you want and do crazy damage. Segueing into that, let's talk about weapons. So ultimately what I think is pretty much always going to be the best for this build is a liquid cooling. You want a ×2 variant because it's just going to do the most damage. This thing's crazy. Anytime you land a crit, it's going to give you that ammo back, so this is perfect for raid bosses. All the raid bosses that I've shown you guys gameplay, if I use this, you could very easily use any weapon that you want, it just won't be as quick, and the purpose of the video was to show how quickly it could be done in the ideal scenario. But if you really like using the Queen's Cry, as I showed in the gameplay earlier, you can use that. I like using the Masterwork Handbow, it's kind of fun. If you made a build fully revolving around the Masterwork Handbow, like not using Frost damage enchant or Elemental damage enchant, you can make this thing do crazy damage. Because the base damage is really high, you can get crits. You could probably get crits of upwards of 1 million. I really like using this Hydra whatnot. If you saw in the gameplay here, I throw it down a few times just because it actually does crazy damage. I'll show a gameplay clip right here of me actually killing Parasite in just a couple seconds with only the Hydras. These things are really good. It's kind of nice just to get your spellweaving stacks, just throw them out there, get your spellweaving stacks up. But also that's what the Masterwork Handbow is good for too, just having it always equipped. You can just shoot it a couple times. Get your spellweaving stack stacked right up real quick. In terms of other weapons, you can use literally anything you want. Like I said, if you have a preference, feel free to use it. It'll probably do just fine. In the gameplay, I used the antique great bow here. I did not use it with the extra damage as I demonstrated, and I was still able to hit for over 2 million with it. And the skeet prod can actually do some crazy damage too, which is a lot of fun. I tried the Carousel. Didn't seem to do all that great, but maybe I didn't use it right. And then anytime that I'm in a chaos chamber and I want it to go really, really quickly, I like to use a pixie. This will still do a lot of damage, even though we're not heavily stacking into spell damage, just because of all the other modifiers that we have going on with this build. And the pixies, you throw them out and they just track all the enemies, so you can do the runs really, really quickly. I heavily take advantage of this, but feel free again to use literally any weapon that you want. Let's talk about the spell, and of course I'll go over everything that is in this build. So for the spell, obviously I'm going to be using a Buffmeister. No, the Buffmeister is not bugged. If you don't use 2 spells, the Buffmeister is not bugged, so please spare me that in the comments. The Buffmeister is literally just because this is going to increase our base damage, and this gives us a massive amount of additional damage. I believe the Cryo one, for whatever reason, scales the base damage that it's going to give you off of additional spell damage increases. I could be wrong on that, but either way, even if that isn't the case, the amount of damage that you get from this is very, very good. You want it to be Zap, so that Pew, so that it gives you additional fire rate. But either way, you want it to be cryo. If you want additional survivability, you could certainly get a dark magic one, so that every shot is going to just heal you back to full health pretty much. But this is ultimately what's going to be the best for damage. If you want to use another spell, like an Ice Spike or whatever else, feel free to use anything that you want. You don't have to use a Buffmeister. Of course, the purpose of this video is to get as much damage as humanly possible, but if you want to use something else, your gun damage is more than fine if you're not killing raid bosses, so you certainly don't need it, but having the extra movement speed, etc. is going to be really good with this. But if there's something else that you like, feel free to slap it on. In terms of the rest of the items, like I said, this build is nearly perfectly set up, and it took a pretty long time to get all of this gear. If you want a more introductory version of it, I have that video posted. You do not need 100% max volatile crazy gear to make this build good. This is just what is going to push it to the next level. So for our necklace here, ideally you want frost damage or whatever the element of the weapon that you're using. Of course, we're using frost, and then spell shot power, and then all damage dealt. The all damage dealt roll here could literally be like 30%. That would be better, but ultimately getting frost damage and spell shot power. Spell shot is going to make our spell weaving stacks give us more, which is then going to increase our gun damage, and then the frost damage, obviously, whatever. And in terms of what you want on the secondary part here, you either want, whenever you cast a spell, reduce your action cooldown, which is going to give you 30% additional spell cooldown when it is on or spell damage when it's on cooldown, which is just flat additional damage. You could alternatively get another ring. I don't believe I have one on me, but look at this roll here, 26% all damage dealt. You could get another one that increases your crit damage whenever your companion gets a crit, and if you use the Hydra before engaging in combat, your companion will often get a crit with the Hydra, and then you'll get the additional crit damage from that. So that's another alternative. You don't really need this, but it just helps you reduce the actions of cooldown rate. And also, if you feel like using a spell that has multiple triggers or is a repeating cast, every cast is going to then proc the 20%. So you can basically remove the cooldown on from the shadows in like a couple seconds just by pressing that over and over again. In terms of shield, we're going to be using the Cursed Wit. Again, if you don't want to use this and you want more survivability, feel free to use whatever you want. The purpose of the video is to get as much damage as possible. If you want more survivability, getting a full battery, that's then going to increase your damage while the ward is full, and then using a class item that activating action skill instantly restores 50% of your ward, and then you can get some other ward stuff such as mage armor in the tree. That's perfectly fine. You'll lose out on a little bit of damage, but do you really need the damage? Unless you're killing the raid boss, not really. So that's a survivability option for you guys. Please don't comment that you keep dying with the build. It's not my fault that you're terrible. Or I'm joking. The game kills you all the time. Survivability is a bit of an issue, but regardless, this is what you want to use if you want to go for damage. Pairing very nicely with that is going to be a mood ring, which is going to be while ward is not full, effects are increased by 100%. Ideally, you want as much pistol crit damage as possible. The reason that I stopped stacking action skill cooldown rate with this build is because with this I'm able to get literally 100% action skill cooldown rate just with these things, and it's probably going to be capping out at that point. I don't know if anything past that point is actually helping us, but this is ultimately what's really good. Ideally, look at the sniper one that I have. You can get it with 50% sniper crit damage. If you could get that, that would be perfect. I'd probably kill the bosses like a good bit faster. So that would be incredibly good. This is the reason why my snipers were doing so much damage, because I have 2 of these things. But ultimately, you just want to get as much crit damage as possible because we're going to be critting a lot. And you want it to have gun damage. An alternative, I guess, would be spell damage, but gun damage is ultimately going to be the best for you. I have tested this. What else would you want on it? I guess whatever other weapon that you're using, maybe magazine size if you feel like it. Okay, so in terms of the class item, you have a couple options here. The one that I have, I believe, is the best one that you can get for this build from my testing. It might be able to be slightly improved. I'm not 100% sure on that, but regardless, you know, the damage is crazy. The alternative, instead of getting magic bullets, which is then going to increase our spell damage conversion to 90% up from 45%, which is like insane, and then we get a couple points from arsenal. That's the main reason that we're using that. The alternative would be getting additional high thread count and then increasing your rate of fire, which is also a massive damage increase. I don't have a perfect one of those, but from my testing, if you had a smart armor one of those, which is what you want to have smart armor for the crit damage here. If you had one of those, that may slightly outshine it just because of the rate of fire, but it seems like you miss out on a lot of just base damage, and not having to get 11 stacks all the time and only having to get 8 is a nice quality of life thing. The only unfortunate thing about this smart armor is that it's going to roll Stabbo primary rather than Spellshot, which is one of the main reasons that I thought that the Spellshot oriented one could be a little bit better, because Stabbo power is only going to increase the duration of From the Shadows. It's not really going to do anything else, but increasing the duration certainly isn't a bad thing, right? You want gun damage and then either gun crit or fire rate. I don't know if the gun crit could be replaced with fire rate, but that would be ideal. And then all damage dealt, and then you want it to be a smart armor. In terms of what else you could get, you could just get one that has a whole bunch of stats, so movement speed, gun crit, gun damage, all damage dealt, and then maybe rate of fire if that's possible. Or another one like this, again, more survivability. You can get 40% max health on a class item, so that would be pretty good. I forgot about enchants. Okay, so for enchants, you want ideally 50% of whatever element you're using. So we're going to be using frost here. You want on action skill start 40% gun damage. That's always going to be good. Depending on what element of gun you're using, you always want the elemental damage. If you're using dark magic, this is not going to work. Don't know if it works for poison or lightning, but I know that it works for frost and for fire. An alternative to this would be like on spell cast, increase damage dealt by 15%, like I have here. And then on your weapon, you always want on action skill start, increase damage dealt by 20%. Our action skill actives are currently bugged to where it's always going to give you the 50%, but this doesn't really matter, because even if this were to get patched, the majority of our damage comes from while we're in From the Shadows, right? So this build is pretty much nerf proof. Just to give a little demonstration of the damage to show you guys that there's not any funny business going on, I'm literally here at, you know, what is this place called? Brighthoof, whatever. I just got 8 spell weaving stacks. I'm going to pop Buffmeister From the Shadows. Game lagged, and then as you can see, I'm already doing over 300k per shot, and I'm not even like sprinting around or anything. 330k per shot, so nothing crazy going on with this build. You just do crazy damage all of the time. That's pretty much it for the build. Here's some gameplay. If you guys enjoyed, again, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe, helps me out a ton. Enjoy the build, guys. Okay, gameplay time. We're on Intense. Gonna be using a pixie a lot because that is the fastest way to kill stuff. I don't have an action skill on. Pixies are just the fastest way to kill things, unfortunately, in a lot of these. Oh, yeah, that's a pixie. It's a little boring, but if I care about getting like a fast run, that's what you want to do. So, I mean, as you can see, the gun itself does pretty good damage. I enjoy using the liquid cooling more than the pixie, but for the purposes of trying to do the map quickly, it's certainly what you want to do, because a lot of what you're waiting for is just spawning, and it takes so much time running to every single enemy and going out of your way to shoot them and stuff like that. Potential Warden class mod buff? Oh, for the class mod. I think on mine, I'm using one that increases the frost damage. I don't know, you could just look in my video. I'm pretty sure the one that I'm using is mathematically the best for that setup. But I'd have to check again. Oh, that's really unlucky. I threw that right in a barrel. Petition to delete barrels. I will do a GoFundMe right now. Raise $10,000 to delete barrels. I will take a road trip out to Gearbox. And I will petition outside of their doors until they delete them. Or I'll just pocket the money. One or the other. Either way. Sign my petition, please. Thank you very much. Oh my god. It will never get old flying into that forts at max speed. Big ol' ice chunk. Big ol' ice chunk flying around. What's up, Alexa? There's no cross save. No, there is not. They said they'll delete barrels for the start of your OnlyFans. You in? It depends. Depends. What do I have to post on OnlyFans? And also, how many people subscribe to it? Because, you know, I'd have no problem doing an OnlyFans if a bunch of people were subscribing to it. Alright, Pigwort, you don't know what's coming. Oh my god! Ooh. Very, very scary situation right there. Very scary situation. Dude, I fought this guy earlier where the healing vengeances kept healing him, and that was the most miserable experience of my life. I didn't notice what was happening. I'm a little too lazy to activate the elite floors just because when I was benchmarking times before, or at least with my build yesterday, I wasn't really seeing... I wasn't doing elite floors because I was literally just testing the build, so... For now, I don't want to make him elite because I just want to see how fast I can get the run, but... not trying to do any crazy speedrun thing. I imagine there's a lot of ways to make... just like in any sort of speedrunning, there's a lot of ways to make things significantly more optimal. It's kind of just to show the potential of the build. These are good counter questions that you weren't prepared for. Well, I'll think about the OnlyFans, dude. I'll get back to you on that one. But like right now, I'm just like waiting for things to spawn. But if I was using my normal weapon, this would be kind of miserable because they're so spread out. Everything is so spread out, so you have to just like run around slowly. But I mean, the liquid cooling, as we all know, just completely destroys everything. But like if I had my pixie out, like this guy would be dead, and I would have finished the thing already, you know. Right, like me swapping to the weapon there just wasted like 10 seconds, basically. Which is kind of unlucky. I probably shouldn't have done that. Now I'm very unhappy. I kind of just ruined the run like that, to be honest. This floor is the worst one. Just because it's random if you get good mimics or not. I wish there was more quartzes. There's probably more that I don't know about, but those do help do it a little bit faster. There's two that I know of. Quartzes are just so satisfying every time. Oh yeah, I got unlucky. I got unlucky with the mimics, dude. Hate to see it. I don't know how you're supposed to handle this, but I just run away. Wait for more to spawn. That's how I'll handle it. Hate to see it though, because yeah, if I had different ones, the floor would have been over with a long time ago. Alright. Got the boss now. Oh, I should never refill health. I like to throw hydras on the boss because it just helps, but they do a lot of damage, but we don't really need it. We don't really need it. Alright, what's our time? Give me the time. 5:35. That's terrible, man.